Defending Israel with David Harris on JBS is made possible in part by a generous gift in memory of Eric and Mira J. Spector, the Paul and Lynn Late Family Foundation, To Life, to Love, Barbara and Bob Goodkind, the Patricia Worthen Ullman Foundation,
Hello JBS viewers, I'm David Harris and this is Defending Israel. This week's guest probably needs no introduction, as you'll see in a moment, but just in case, Ayaan Hirsi Ali is a well-known activist, a best-selling author, a fellow at the prestigious Hoover Institute, and former member of the Dutch Parliament. Ayaan has just launched a media platform called Courage.media, which aims to amplify the voices of those who are showing great courage by standing up to the anti-Western, anti-liberal, anti-democratic movements that are taking root in Western media, politics, schools, yes, in our communities. Ayaan, welcome to the show. It's a great pleasure to see you again.
David, it's a great pleasure to see you, and thank you for that introduction. I want to reiterate that you actually, when you were president of the American Jewish Committee, you brought me to America. You introduced me to the American Jewish communities, and you defended me many times in public. And of course, I don't forget that. It's lovely to see you again.
Ayaan, thank you very much. Lots of questions, very little time. There's our challenge. But let me begin this way. As you and I meet, a new president of the United States is about to take office. If he called you into the Oval Office and said, Ayaan, I want to hear from you. Especially I want to get a sense from you of what ought to be some of my priorities in the foreign policy space. Given your background and experience, share with us, if you what would you tell President Trump?
Well, I think I would tell him that what he is doing in terms of his foreign policy priorities, that I agree with the emphasis on his energy policy in this combination of America first, but America also as the dominant leader of the world, our competition with China and trying to defeat them. I agree with all of that. But none of that is obviously, I'm not an expert in any of that. I don't know, I hate the word expert, but I'll say I know a little bit about the challenge of radical Islam. And I would say to him, please seize this once in a lifetime opportunity for a United States president to fight against the ideology of Islamism. And I would explain to him why it's an opportunity. And I would say, number one, we now have the core Muslim countries like Saudi Arabia and the UAE actually fighting radical Islamist networks like the Muslim Brotherhood and like the Islamist regime of Iran. We didn't have that back when President Bush was president, for instance. Second, I would tell him, I know he's going to rekindle the Abraham Accords, but the Abraham Accords during Trump 1 were focused on trade and security. And I would add a third pillar, which is to develop a clear strategy to fight the ideology of Islamism, to give the trade and security objectives a chance to succeed. And number three, I would say, Israel. I am a fan of Bibi Netanyahu, and I know many people are not, but I'm a very stubborn woman. I just happen to love him. I think he did a great job in degrading Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, in weakening and exposing the Islamist regime of Iran. He has removed Syria from Iran's control. I'm not saying the people in charge in Syria now are nice people, but Syria is no longer under the control of Iran. And those are all great things. But the next phase, and I think Bibi Netanyahu knows this and his cabinet, the next phase is to fight and eliminate the ideology. That's the real mind virus. And number 4, I would say to President Trump and his team, that Islamism, radical Islamism, is now not so much a problem in the Middle East, it's a problem in America and in Europe. We saw this last year during these so-called university protests when our students were rooting for Hamas. And I would tell him to identify and map the Islamist movement organizations, their networks, their financial linkages, their mosques, their Islamic centers, formal and informal groups, and then develop a plan to marginalize them. I would say to the president, starve them of funding, of political and social legitimacy. I would liken it to an effort like the one of the denazification in Germany and Europe, right? The denazification of Germany and Europe and other Western European and other Western populations right after the Second World War. That's what I would tell them. And David, you've known me long enough to know that is basically what I have been saying for almost the last 20 years. And so I feel a bit like a broken record, but I'm going to try my luck again one more time and say, this is what needs to happen if we don't want to keep losing lives the way we are doing, if we don't want to have another October 7, if we don't want to have another 9/11, if we don't want to have another, what just happened in New Orleans, if we don't want to have all of these problems that we have in Europe, we have to go after the ideology in a sustained way.
And viewers, I have known Ayaan for nearly 20 years and can attest to the fact that she has been saying this very consistently, almost like the Greek mythological character Cassandra. Destined to tell the truth, but not to be listened to. But then you said, Ayaan, just a moment ago, President Trump, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. So let me come back to what you just said. And I'm not going to try and role play President Trump. That would be beyond my capacity. But
good luck.
But many would say, Ayaan, you know, as a political leader today, it's very difficult to thread the needle between Islam as a religion and Islamism. And no matter what I try to do as a political leader, some would say, I am being accused of Islamophobia or anti-Arab hatred, or now the new term from Toronto, Canada, is anti-Palestinian racism. So how do I walk that tightrope? I, the political leader, am asking you, Ayaan Hirsi Ali, between respect for a religion, a faith, and opposition to those who've seized the faith and interpreted it in this way?
So again, I think maybe what's unique about President Trump is that it doesn't seem, insults thrown his way don't seem to derail his policies, and he gives as much as he gets. And I actually wish, all of us wish, that that's not how we communicate with one another, but that's the reality we have within which we have to operate. And so these insults don't seem to make an impression on him. But more importantly, I pointed out the fact that back in the day when President Bush was president, who was very polite and whose language is the one, you would have your 3-year-olds and 5-year-olds sit and listen to him. But back in the day when President George Bush was fighting radical Islam, he didn't have the support of the core countries of Islam. Now it's Saudi Arabia that has banned the Muslim Brotherhood. Saudi Arabia used to host the Muslim Brotherhood. Now they are banned, and it's the same with the UAE. This started after the so-called Arab Spring years, when these Islamist movements made it very clear that they wanted to overthrow the governments of these countries. And so that's what has changed them, the rise of ISIS. There were more Saudi volunteers that went to ISIS in 2013, 14, 15 than any other country. And so there's this unique opportunity where the core countries, Saudi Arabia is a very special country in the world of Islam, 1.5, 1.8 billion Muslims, face Mecca 5 times a day. It's not just any other country. It's the core country of Islam. And that core country of Islam today is determined to fight radical Islam in its Sunni manifestation and its Shia manifestation. So this places Trump's administration today in a very unique place. And I don't know how long that's going to last. And so you bring them to the table and you ask them how they're doing, why they're doing what they're doing, and how they're doing it. And there's this opportunity to work together on the state level and with Israel, and I credit Israel with knowing more about the ideology than anyone else, because it's the ideology that threatens the very existence of Israel and the Jewish people. So this is, if I were him, what I would take advantage of and bring his team, that he has put the security team together. Also, in this new Trump cabinet, the smartest people in the world have committed their names and their reputations and their resources to help. I'm thinking of Elon Musk. I'm thinking of Vivek Ramaswamy. I'm thinking of some of the other people in Silicon Valley, Mark Andreessen's. You have some of the smartest people. And when you get these people from the tech world and the private sector who are used to solving problems, they look at a problem and they want to solve it. I think that is another unique moment which some of the other previous presidents didn't have. By the way, David, let me say this. When George Bush was president, he did have in place a team within Homeland Security and the other agencies whose job was to understand the ideology of Islamism and try to fight it on the terms of, to prevent attacks occurring on American soil and derailing American interests elsewhere by trying to understand the ideology. And then President Obama came into office and he dismantled those agencies and threw out their work products. And I know that some of those experts are still alive, that they can be brought back, and they're basically sitting on gold. So I don't want to litigate what happened in the past. That might be time for a different podcast. But I know that we also have the knowledge if we wanted to tap it.
Fascinating, Ayaan. So I also don't want to litigate the past, but just a month ago, President Biden announced a new initiative, the first in American history, which was a new national strategy to counter Islamophobia and anti-Arab hatred. I think those were the exact words. From your perspective, is that kind of initiative helpful, harmful, or it makes no difference either way?
Oh, it's very harmful. It's absolutely very, yeah. And the capture of the subversion and the capture of these institutions started during the Obama years. They insinuate the Islamists in America, led by the Muslim Brotherhood, and some of them by, funded by, and the ideology also comes from the Islamist regime of Iran, through the universities and through these agencies. They subverted the Democratic Party and made their way into the corridors of power. And it is in the Obama years that this started, and then, of course, went on steroids during the Biden years. But at first, because this was the only topic that I was following, I thought it was unique to, the subversion was only unique to, say, the Islamists, because they were incredibly determined. But now we see that there are other ideologies, and that the American government was subverted in different ways. And there's this opportunity of accountability. I'm thinking of Doge, where you follow the money, and in so doing, the allocation of resources, and then who are these people who are allocating these resources, and what are their enthusiasms? And I think in a way, it's going to lay bare, it's going to expose what these interests are. And so there is an opportunity for President Trump and his new team to correct the past mistakes of Biden and Obama.
Ayaan, you've mentioned the Muslim Brotherhood several times. I want to be sure that our JBS viewers really understand, because it's a very benign sounding name. It sounds like a fraternity or fraternal organization, the Muslim Brotherhood. Why, in your mind, is this so pernicious, and how has it been so successful in penetrating the United States and, yes, other Western nations?
So the Muslim Brotherhood was founded in 1920 by Hassan al-Banna. It was founded on the ashes of the Ottoman Empire there's a book by Bernard Lewis called What Went Wrong. And the question that they were trying to answer, this is in the 1920s, was why did the Islamic Empire fall? And some of them said, because we were left behind and we have to copy the European powers. And think about someone like Kemal Ataturk, and he went with the idea of the nation state, and he established Turkey, and others established other nation states. But there was a group that said, no, we have to go back to the core of Islam and core of political Islam. And one of them was Hassan al-Banna. He wasn't the only one, but it's his movement that continues to live to this day. And his movement has got, if you will, two heads. There's the one head that applies non-violent means, and it is a cluster of tools, from preaching in mosques, from doing charity work, from winning and recruiting followers, by doing things that all of us would applaud. Helping the poor, providing healthcare, providing schooling, and so on. But then it has this other head, which combines naked violence, the jihadi attacks that you see. Hamas is a product of the Muslim Brotherhood. Al-Qaeda is a product of the Muslim Brotherhood. ISIS is a product of the Muslim Brotherhood. And then in between is this gray area where at times intimidation is applied. They've copied a lot from the way the Soviet Union, the Bolsheviks, the Leninists, the Trotskysts, I never know how to pronounce those people who fought. They borrowed a lot of the ways they operate. So did Ayatollah Khomeini, by the way. But in any case, the most sophisticated, most influential Islamist network is the Muslim Brotherhood. When it suits them, the men will shave their beards and wear suits and speak in perfect American accented English, British accented English, French, German, and you name it. Some of them will go so far as even to drink wine just to show that, we are all in. And this is what I mean by the Soviet tricks of intelligence. But they are constantly pushing their objective. And what's their objective? Their objective is to impose Sharia law on the world, first in Muslim countries and in Muslim communities, and then the rest of the world. And they state it very clearly. They say we want to transform the individual, and then the family, and then the society, and then the world. And if anyone in your audience wants to trace them back from the day of, Hassan al-Banna, he wasn't the world's most sophisticated leader, but in terms of what has he achieved, in the year 2028, the Muslim Brotherhood will be 100 years old. And if Hassan al-Banna were alive today and he were to look at what he has wrought in the world, I think he'd be very, very proud of them. He would be especially pleased with how gullible Westerners are.
So as far as I know, Austria is the only Western country that has formally tried to ban the Muslim Brotherhood within its borders. While you mentioned certain Arab countries that have done so, no other Western country, including the United States, has done so. Back to your meeting with Donald Trump, the first question. Would you ask President Trump to ban the Muslim Brotherhood in the United States?
I would start by saying first, map it. You see, you've got to understand the problem. And every time we have undertaken these endeavors to map it, then we sort of drop the ball. The problem falls through the cracks between the different agencies. And I would first say, let's map it, let's identify it, and then the parts of it will be banned because they are clearly criminal and clearly seditious. But the trick is what to do about the organizations and the individuals that within an open society are engaged in activities that are perfectly constitutional and legal. And so it's a conundrum, but we have to come together and sit together, bring in people who have the legal expertise and the expertise in fighting ideas. This is not the first time that the United States is fighting a pernicious ideology. We fought the communists. I know we won and then dropped the ball, but we fought the Soviet Union and we defeated them in their own countries when it comes to, and their satellite countries, when it comes to showing the people who lived under the Soviet Union which idea was better. We also defeated, at great cost, National Socialism. And my proposal will be to do to the Muslim Brotherhood and Islamism in general what we did to the Nazi ideology after the military defeat of Hitler.
One country that you followed particularly closely and know very well is Great Britain. And as we meet, the anger, the outrage, the debate is going full force on the issue of the grooming and raping allegations. And you've been outspoken on this on social media. But again, to return to what you're saying, there are those who want to interpret this through religious and cultural terms, and there are those who reject it and simply say it's not about Pakistani groups or gangs in Britain, it's about men. And to try and identify them more specifically is itself an act potentially of Islamophobia or racism. How do you grapple with the current crisis in Britain, and what should be the path followed?
So what I try to do is by pointing to the British, and those who want to hear, and those who see the problems, that the British have adopted and embraced a cocktail of very bad ideas, and they did it with great enthusiasm. And the cocktail of bad ideas is made up of multiculturalism, Islamism, what Elon calls the woke mind virus, which is this neo-communist pathology that's infected America so badly. And of course, the existing class wars, the girls that are being abused and raped by these perpetrators, these are working class girls. And in their own country, it seems as if they're seen as expendable. And you said Great Britain, but I see this problem not just in Britain. It's in Germany, it's in France, it's in Belgium, it's in Holland, it's in Sweden. It's the same, every single country that has taken in large numbers of Muslim immigrants and that has allowed Islamism in its dawah form, in its non-violent form, to run rampant, and that has adopted these crazy ideas that came from America, the wokeism, and that has a working class, a white working class. They're all affected in the same way.
Ayaan,
now the British, sorry.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. So when I lived in Holland, it was very easy to guilt trip the Dutch. David, because as you know, more Jewish people were deported from Holland in proportion to their population per head in Holland than anywhere else in Europe during the Second World War. But the British should not be open, should not allow themselves to be guilt-tripped, even though they have done that. The British have a great history. They fought against slavery. They were the first to start the fight against decolonization, even though it was not in their interest. The former British colonies were left in better shape often than they were found. The British fought, and many, many Brits died fighting the Nazis. They fought the Cold War. They fought apartheid. So if I were a British citizen, anyone calling me a racist or a xenophobe or an Islamophobe, I would tell them to go, buzz off. I would offer them this history and say, how dare you?
Yeah. Unfortunately, we have just a few minutes and I've got 1,000 questions. So maybe just a quick answer. Another country you know very well, you just mentioned, is the Netherlands. In November, we saw the scenes of Israeli soccer fans who were then being pursued, and a debate resulted about whether or not this was a pogrom. The mayor of Amsterdam said no, many others said yes. Were you surprised by what you saw in the Netherlands? And were you pleased or were you disappointed by the reaction of the Dutch government to what happened?
I wasn't surprised. I wrote a piece about this and I went on the Free Press to talk about it. I wasn't surprised in the least. It's the same thing as in Britain. There are two toxic ideologies today in Holland, as in Britain, as in elsewhere. And it is this combination of this ideology of postmodernism, multiculturalism, let's just call it the mind virus, and Islamism. And both of these ideologies are highly anti-Semitic. And I think there are parallels actually to be drawn between what's happening in Britain to the white working class girls who are being gang raped and what happened in Amsterdam to the Jewish communities. It's that both of these groups, the working classes and the Jewish communities, they are no longer considered to be politically relevant. Normally, both groups voted for center-left parties, and it was center-left parties that protected them and looked after their interests. And that's not happening anymore. And the working classes and the Jewish communities, they haven't formed their own parties. I think numerically, I was told very often, numerically, the Jewish communities are totally irrelevant. And so for the Islamists in Holland to organize a pogrom, which is exactly what it was, in a systematic persecution of the Jewish communities, yeah, the political parties make excuses for them, and then they say it's not a pogrom, and what follows is normally the semantic wars. It's all these different ways of deflection, and then suddenly make the victimizer becomes the victim. We're supposed to feel sorry for these poor lads, they've been excluded from society, they're victims of discrimination, so they can carry on these acts. And the mayor of Amsterdam, Jewish, and he always brings in his own history, his parents and his family's history and how they were affected by the Holocaust, to make excuses for these people. I never understood him. But yeah, he hasn't changed, and I haven't changed.
Ayaan, it's so important what you're saying. We literally have 60 seconds left. Much of this television audience are Jews. So maybe just as a wrap up, what's your advice to the Jewish viewers and listeners of this interview with Ayaan Hirsi Ali? Give them what you think they should be thinking about and potentially doing.
I think they should see these ideologies Islamism is the most radical, most dangerous, most lethal ideology in town today, and it's in many places, that wants to eliminate not just the state of Israel, but Jewishness, Jews, the Jewish way of life. It has adopted the Nazi propaganda and their playbook, exactly. And they are finding a lot of help from these politically correct woke people. So I would say fight back, develop coalitions with other groups that are affected, women, working class women, but also working class communities in Europe and elsewhere, Christians. I want to say to my Jewish friends, we're not living in 1925, it's 2025, and this is the current threat. So let's fight the current threat, not the one of 100 years ago.
And perhaps drawing on what you said earlier, remembering that there are countries today like the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain and increasingly Saudi Arabia that share the same threat perception and should not be seen as anything but friends and potential friends. Ayaan, I can't thank you enough for the last 30 minutes. Powerful messages, important messages. I hope Donald Trump will hear your advice, both through this show and perhaps through you personally. And thank you for your courage and your wisdom as always. JBS viewers, you've just been treated to a very special half-hour show with Ayaan Hirsi Ali. This is David Harris defending Israel and looking forward to seeing you again next week.